Breaking news at Ocean Crest Marine Park. A killer whale attacked 2 trainers during a live show. The wife is dead. The husband survived, but barely.
That's how the world first heard it. Just a few seconds on TV. Cold, detached. But what those words couldn't capture was the horror, the screams of children, the blood spreading through the pool, and the illusion that shattered in front of thousands. Because let's be real, America loves the performance. We clap, we film, we hashtag the moment like it's best day ever. We tell ourselves it's safe, that nature can be trained, packaged, and sold. For a while, it feels magical. But here's the truth. This wasn't magic. This was a red flag waving in plain sight, and nobody saw it. Adrien and Marissa Cole weren't just trainers. They were the golden couple, the face of Ocean Crest. He was calm, steady, untouchable. She was radiant, graceful, carrying what we call main character energy. Together, they sold the illusion that love and trust could silence millions of years of instinct. But illusions don't last. Not when 6 tons of power is circling beneath your feet. So before we dive into what really happened that day, I want to ask you, if you had been there, watching the water explode into chaos, would you still believe in the dream? Or would you finally face the truth? Let me know in the comments. You ever notice how America loves a good lie, as long as it sparkles? We'll buy tickets, clap our hands, and tell ourselves we're watching Trust, when really, it's just danger in costume. That's the trick of it. A shiny brochure, a smiling couple, and suddenly, the ocean looks tame, packaged, and ready for sale. We eat it up like it's Netflix, but the ocean doesn't play by scripts. At Ocean Crest Marine Park, the illusion was alive and thriving. The stadium wasn't just filled with people, it was filled with worship. Families with popcorn, kids in plastic ponchos, grandparents with camcorders. They weren't just watching a show. They were watching a myth. And at the center of that myth stood Adrien and Marissa Cole, the golden couple of the sea. They were perfect for the part. Adrien, tall, steady, with the calm presence of a man who looked like he could command the tide itself. Marissa, gentle, radiant, her smile wide enough to convince anyone that even 6 tons of muscle and teeth could be a friend. Together, they weren't just trainers. They were symbols. Love, trust, and spectacle, gift wrapped in wetsuits. And of course, their star was waiting below the surface. Kalin, 6 tons of black and white perfection, slicing through the blue water like a living shadow. The brochures called her a gentle giant. The commercials called her the miracle of the sea. And the crowd believed it, every last word. As the sunlight turned the pool into liquid glass, the crowd roared with a fever usually reserved for rock concerts. This wasn't just a marine park, it was a cathedral. And Adrien and Marissa, they weren't just trainers. They were priests, offering the illusion that nature could be tamed, that instinct could be rewritten with a whistle and a smile. But illusions, they don't last. And in the glare of that golden afternoon, the cracks had already begun to form. And then, boom! The surface broke like glass, and Kalin rose from the deep. 6 tons of muscle and memory, exploding into the sunlight. Mist sprayed into the stands like holy water, kids screaming, cameras flashing, and the crowd lost their minds. You'd think Beyoncé had just walked on stage. That's the vibe. To the public, Kalin wasn't a predator. She was a celebrity, the gentle giant, the miracle of Ocean Crest. Parents pointed, kids gasped, and for a moment it felt like the ocean itself had agreed to put on a costume just for them. The illusion was flawless, and Adrien and Marissa, they stood at the edge like royalty. Adrien, with that steady confidence, the man who looked like he could keep the tide on a leash. Marissa with her soft smile, radiating main character energy, waving as if the audience was her congregation. Together, they didn't just run a show. They sold a dream. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. Behind the applause, something else was always waiting. Kalin wasn't built for tricks and spotlights. She was built for the hunt, for silence, for power older than every human in that stadium combined. That truth was sitting just beneath the surface, coiled and patient, while thousands cheered as though love and discipline could erase instinct. The crowd saw a spectacle. Adrien and Marissa saw a partner. But Kalin saw something else. And trust me, that look in her eye, it was living rent-free in Adrien's head. Because predators don't play, they wait. Here's the thing about illusions. They don't shatter all at once. They crack. Quietly, subtly, so quietly that the crowd kept cheering, blind to the shift beneath the surface. At first, everything looked perfect. Adrien dove in, his body slicing through the water, Kalin lifting him high into the air like a trophy. Applause thundered. Kids stomped their feet. The music blared. Seconds later, Marissa followed with that same radiant grace, her dive seamless, her movements sharp as choreography. For the audience, it was magic. For the cameras, it was perfection. For the brochures, material for the next glossy commercial. But Adrien noticed. He always noticed. Kalin's circles were different now. Tighter, her breaths harsher. Each hiss from her blowhole echoed sharp against the stadium walls. And her eye, dark, unblinking, lingered on Marissa just a little too long. Predators don't stare for no reason. He tapped the water. Quick signal. Reset. Calm her down. Wrap it up before something slipped. But Marissa, God bless her. She smiled. She raised her hand in cue, as if trust alone could smooth the storm building beneath them. She didn't see danger. She saw connection. And isn't that just us, right? We always want the fairy tale more than the warning. We ignore the cracks, because the dream is prettier than the truth. From the stands, people clapped louder, thinking this was the highlight reel. Trainers at the sidelines exchanged uneasy glances. And Adrien, chest tight, couldn't shake the feeling. He had worked with Kalin long enough to know something was shifting. The ocean doesn't lie. It only waits. And Kalin was waiting. So let me ask you, if you were Marissa, standing there with 6 tons of raw instinct staring you down, would you have trusted the years of training, or would you have gotten out of the water? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The surface shattered. Kalin erupted from the depths like a torpedo, 6 tons of black and white fury, blasting upward in a fountain of foam. Her tail came down with a crack so loud it rattled the glass walls of the pool. The crowd went wild. Parents clapped, kids screamed in delight, phones shot skyward. To them, this was the moment, the Instagram clip, the highlight reel, the thing they'd post later with captions like, "Best day ever." But Adrien knew. This wasn't a vibe. This was a red flag. Water drenched the trainers, soaking Marissa's hair, streaking her face. She forced a smile, lifting her hand again, as though one gesture could reassure 10,000 strangers that everything was fine. Her eyes betrayed her for a split second, just a flicker of unease, but the music roared, and the crowd kept cheering. From the sidelines, other trainers froze. They'd seen it before. That silence before a storm, that shift in an orca's rhythm that no whistle could fix. Adrien's gut twisted. He reached for his whistle, ready to shut it all down, to pull the curtain before the act turned into something darker. But Marissa stepped forward, hand extended, smile unbroken. Trust was her religion, and Kalin was her gospel. She believed the years of training, the bond they preached, were enough to hold back instinct. And Kalin's dark eye surfaced again, staring, unblinking, fixed on Marissa like a storm about to break. The audience saw a spectacle. Adrien saw a predator deciding. And if you've ever ignored the obvious red flags just to keep the dream alive, you know that sinking feeling. This wasn't a plot twist. It was the beginning of the end. And the truth? You can't ignore that energy. Not when 6 tons of instinct are circling just beneath your feet. The pool went still. Too still. Even with the music blasting and the crowd roaring, Adrien felt it. That pressure in the air, the sense that something ancient had just stepped into the room. And then the water erupted. Kalin launched upward with terrifying force, her jaws clamping around Marissa's arm in a violent snap that echoed across the stadium. White foam exploded into the air, and for half a heartbeat, the audience thought it was part of the show. Then came the scream. Not staged, not rehearsed. Real, raw, blood-curdling. The sound ripped the illusion to shreds. Marissa was gone beneath the surface in an instant, dragged into a spiral of shadow and teeth. The water turned violent, surging as Kalin twisted her massive body, pulling Marissa deeper. Adrien dove without hesitation, his lungs burning, his heart hammering so loud it felt like it would crack his ribs. He reached her hand, slim, trembling, thrashing, but Kalin jerked sideways, slamming Marissa against the pool wall. The crack that followed wasn't music, it was bone. Blood bloomed, a crimson cloud spiraling upward like smoke in the water. Adrien struck Kalin with his fists, pounding against the slick black and white flank. To a 5-ton predator, it meant nothing. His blows were whispers against thunder. Kalin twisted again, dragging Marissa down, deeper into the abyss. Her eyes wide, her mouth spilling bubbles of panic. She looked at Adrien like he was her only lifeline. And he tried. God, he tried. To hold her. To pull her free. But instinct was merciless. Above the surface, chaos detonated. Families screamed, children sobbed. Parents yanked their kids away. Security rushed the platform. Whistles shrieked, safety lines slapped the water. But none of it mattered. The stadium was no longer a theater. It was a crime scene. Adrien broke the surface for air, choking, gasping, his legs screaming in pain. He dove again, vision blurred with salt and blood, fighting the current as Kalin's massive tail beat like a war drum. For 1 second, he managed to grab Marissa's wrist. Their eyes locked. Panic, pleading, love. But Kalin wrenched her sideways, tearing Adrien's grip loose as though it were nothing. The orca wasn't frantic. She wasn't out of control. She was deliberate, calculated. Every movement precise, every strike a reminder that this was her world, her rules. Marissa's scream broke the surface for a fleeting instant, before she was yanked down again. The crowd froze, the sound of her voice living rent-free in every witness's head. Adrien dove once more, his chest on fire, his body breaking. And in that moment, he realized the unthinkable truth. They weren't trainers anymore. They weren't symbols. They were prey. And Kalin had decided the hunt wasn't over. The pool was chaos, foam and blood, screams and sirens. What had been a stage of wonder now churned like a battlefield. Safety lines splashed into the water, whistles pierced the air. Trainers on the sidelines shouted commands that drowned in the panic. But Kalin didn't care. She circled slowly, her massive body gliding like a ghost beneath the surface. Every turn was a reminder. This was her ocean, and nothing human could break that truth. Adrien surfaced, gasping, his leg torn, pain searing through his body. He spat blood and salt, eyes frantic, scanning for Marissa. For one brief moment, her head broke the surface. Hair plastered across her face, mouth open in a desperate scream. Then she was gone again. Adrien dove, ignoring the fire in his lungs, ignoring the broken rhythm of his chest. He pushed deeper, darker, until his eyes caught her, a pale shape in Kalin's jaws. Her leg twisted, her arms clawing at the water, her face contorted in terror. He reached, stretching every muscle, brushing her fingertips. But Kalin rolled, dragging her away, slamming her sideways with a whip of her tail. The shock sent Adrien tumbling, dazed, his chest erupting with pain. Above, the audience was unraveling. Children cried into their parents' shoulders. Families stampeded toward the exits, some frozen in disbelief, others screaming for help. The stadium shook not with applause, but with chaos. And then, suddenly, Kalin let go. Marissa's body surfaced, limp, spinning on the crimson-streaked water. Trainers dove in, hauling her to the platform, their voices breaking with urgency. "Get her up! Now! Now! Now!" Adrien clawed his way to the edge, dragging himself over the concrete, every movement burning, blood streaming down his shredded leg. They laid her on the platform. Her skin was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue. Blood dripped down her arm where Kalin's teeth had torn through. Trainers pressed on her chest, pumping, counting. Another forced air into her lungs. The sound of CPR filled the stadium. Compressions, gasps, desperate commands. Adrien collapsed beside her, gripping her hand with trembling fingers. "Marissa, stay with me. Please, please, come back." His voice cracked, torn between a scream and a prayer. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering words no one else could hear. The crowd fell silent. Thousands watched, frozen, as life and death played out in front of them. Minutes stretched like hours. Each push on her chest echoed through the arena. Adrien begged, shook her hand, refused to let go. But her body did not answer. Her eyes stayed closed. Finally, the attempts slowed. Hands lifted. Whistles fell silent. Trainers lowered their heads. The truth settled in, heavier than the ocean itself. Marissa was gone. And in that moment, the stadium, once filled with thunderous cheers, echoed only with silence, broken by the sound of Adrien's sobs. The illusion had died with her, and so had he, in every way but breath. The pool at Ocean Crest lay still, but the silence was unbearable. The stands, once bursting with cheers, were now emptied. Rows of seats staring down like hollow eyes at a crime scene that could never be erased. The water rippled gently, but to Adrien it wasn't water anymore. It was the grave of everything he loved. Officials moved quickly, their voices clipped, sterile. A tragic accident, under investigation, unforeseeable. The words were rehearsed, designed to dull the edges, to make something monstrous sound ordinary. Cameras rolled, headlines formed, and before the night was over, Marissa's final moments would circle the globe. To strangers, she would be a news story. To the park, she would be a footnote. To Adrien, she was his life, ripped away in front of thousands. Kalin was moved into isolation, drained from the pool like a problem to be stored away. But the stains remained. Not just blood, but trust. Not just death, but the illusion shattered. For years, Adrien and Marissa had preached about bonds stronger than instinct, about love rewriting the wild. And in one golden afternoon, the ocean had proven them wrong. Adrien never returned to Ocean Crest. The thought of stepping onto that stage again was unbearable. He carried only silence, the sound of her hand slipping from his grip, the scream swallowed by water, the moment he realized they were prey. And maybe that's the truth we all ignore. We package predators into shows, call them gentle giants, sell tickets to a dream. But instinct never sleeps. It only waits. So remember this: the ocean does not forgive illusions. And as Adrien stared into the still pool one last time, Kalin's dark eye broke the surface, watching, silent, reminding him of the truth he would carry forever. In the end, the story of Adrien and Marissa Cole wasn't just about a performance gone wrong. It was about the collapse of an illusion. For years, they embodied the dream that love and trust could tame 6 tons of instinct. But the ocean does not bend to belief. It waits, it remembers, and when the moment comes, it reminds us of our place. Adrien survived that day, but survival is not the same as living. What he carried out of Ocean Crest wasn't victory, it was silence. The silence of her hand slipping away. The silence of thousands leaving with nightmares instead of wonder. The silence that follows when truth tears the mask from spectacle. And maybe that's what we need to remember. Wildness cannot be caged, and illusions never last. But what about you? Do you believe killer whales should ever perform for entertainment? Or should their place remain only in the open sea? Share your thoughts below.